Well,
Great question. I'll let Rudy handle that.
as a matter of fact, on March the 9th, we will be celebrating our 40th anniversary. Um, and
Congratulations.
it's been a beautiful ride. We met at a funeral in 1983. It was one of the rare moments I was in church. I wasn't a church attender, church goer, but it was at a funeral, and I remember, man, looking over my right shoulder. The door kind of like swung open. Um, uh, it was really interesting, but the door felt like it just swung open, and this bright light came through the door.
Wow.
Um, yeah, and so it was so bright that I remember uh, first of all thinking throughout the entire funeral that I needed to meet her, and her was Juanita. Uh, After the funeral, my mother was there. I asked my mother if she knew her. My mother said that is Silver's niece. That's Juanita's aunt. I said, "Is Silver here?" And my mom said that she is over there. And I went and introduced myself to Juanita's aunt. And I said, "I'd like to meet your niece." And her aunt said, "Well, her mother is here. Um, Let me introduce you to her mother." She introduced me to her mother, and her mother introduced me to her. And from that moment forward, in those days, I was in a number of businesses, but she was in the insurance and securities business. And from that moment forward, I was trying to get a date, and she was trying to get an appointment to sell me some insurance. And so I got the date, she got the appointment. We connected, and I thought almost immediately I knew it was something different about her. So different that it was almost it was stunning to
Mhm.
my my sensibility in those days. And ironically, man, we dated kind of like dinner, lunch, lunch and dinner, and had a really great time. But during that brief period, about 6 months, the I had a voice that that spoke kind of parody to me that said, "Don't do anything to harm her. Don't do
Wow.
anything to harm her." And I listened. We went out to dinner shortly thereafter. After that dinner date that night, the next day, I didn't call her. She didn't call me, and I expected to never see her again.
Mm.
That was uh, a, a period of about a year, and we didn't talk, but you know, she would hear about me periodically. She would hear about me periodically, and during that time, I was thinking about her. I guess those thought waves, and were going. And at the end of that year, um, the voice said, "Give her a call," and because I knew I was in a different place,
Mhm.
and at that moment, I called her. She was available for lunch. We went to lunch, and a few months later, we were married. That was 40 years ago. And during those
So,
days, I had
go ahead.
such a gray cloud. Uh, I was in kind of several businesses. Some of them weren't necessarily socially redeeming. And the cloud was so gray, her mother acknowledged the cloud, right? Like
Mm.
it's something, you know, but it was really I think the bond, the spiritual bond between us transcended my past and my current,
Mm.
and even her expectations.
I always enjoyed being with Rudy. He was well read and he had fascinating conversations, and that just really appealed to me. And one particular night, the night we went to dinner and didn't call each other, while I was at dinner, I thought to myself, you know what? He is such a male chauvinist. I don't think I can be with a guy that's a male chauvinist, right? And so that night, while he has had the voice telling him not to do anything that would keep me from trusting him and so forth, I'm saying, you know, he's nice, but I don't think this can go anywhere. And so that year later, my father and I and my mom were in business together, Campbell's Insurance and Associates. And we every year we had a Christmas party for our staff and clients. And so at the end of that party, my dad and mom and I had finished cleaning up everything. And we were just sitting talking. And my dad said, why can't you date somebody nice like Rudy? The next day, Rudy called me.
Wow.
Isn't that something?
And we've not
That's
stopped
crazy.
being each other, seeing each other, loving each other, eating lunch and dinner since that time. From when we got married, I got to tell you about how I was proposed to.
Oh, please do.
So one of Rudy's businesses, did you want to mention the business or you don't
Yeah,
want?
yeah, yeah. I had a motel. We
Yeah,
rented a
so
room
Rudy
by
had a
the hour.
motel and he would work the night shift. And so usually a couple of times a week after I got off work, I would go and hang out with him. And so he was sitting at his desk and he was reading the Houston Business Journal. And I was reading a magazine called Life Insurance Sales. And so I've got my magazine open. He's reading the Houston Business Journal. And every now and then he'd tell me something he was reading. And then he says, so when you want to get this over with anyway? And I said, what about January? He said, what about June? I said, what about March? And so he said, okay, March. That was my proposal. If I hadn't been in alignment, I would have missed that.
The most romantic proposal in the
He had
history.
never said he loved me. He never said he wanted to marry me. He had never alluded to any real long-term relationship in any way. It was always, well, what you doing Thursday? You know, it was never any, I want to spend the rest of my life with you. It was none of that kind of talk, which I later found out was because Rudy said he didn't want to play with love. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciated that. And so I was just so grateful that I say the Holy Spirit had us on the same page when he started saying, when you want to get this over with anyway, that I would know. Because now here's the thing. I was so naive that when sometimes men would say something to me and I'd go to Rudy. I said, Rudy, this person said such and such to me. Were they hitting on me? And he would say, yeah, baby, they hitting on you. All right. So this idea of him saying something that was kind of cloaked, like when you want to get this over with anyway. For me to have immediately known what he was talking about, to me, was just the beauty of God being present to us in that moment.
Yeah.
My dad told my sister and I when we were growing up to always marry a man. He said, marry a man that's teachable. For me, what that translated to mean was neither of us were going to always have everything we needed in a relationship. So be open and willing to get resources to make the relationship work. And so in our first 18 months, we went to marriage counseling because we realized we came from two very different worlds, even though our worlds had some commonalities. Both sides of our families had entrepreneurs. Both sides of our families had women who managed the family's real estate. And so there were these dynamics. Both of us had family grocery stores in the business. I mean, just all these dynamics, that said, hey, we've got some real commonalities, but when it came to relationships, it was so powerful the way our therapist said to us what our goal was in marriage. And the therapist said, You come from a round family. You come from a square family. Your job is to take the best out of the round, the best out of the square, and make a scround.
Right, that's crown. I remember that.
And that was
And
just so profound because I'm a very visual person. So it gave me an image. Oh, okay. So what worked in your family, Rudy? What didn't work?
mhm,
What worked in my family? What didn't work? And here we are 40 years later, still perfecting our ground, okay?
Wow.
And still getting counseling. Because
mhm,
as
Yeah.
you enter different seasons in your marriage, you're going to need different things.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we have been, I've been in counseling off and on all 40 years. And we
Wow.
never stopped seeking insight and advice as to how we could be a better couple.
And here's what Rudy always says, that we build our we are building an account of trust. And so you make deposits in pennies. It's in the little things. It's in
Mm,
the, when you say, I'm going to be home at 6, you're at home at 6. When you say,
mhm.
we're going to do XYZ, we do XYZ unless we've discussed it and decided to do otherwise, right? So we build trust in pennies, but we make withdrawals in dollars.
Whoa.
And when withdrawals get made, they are often those critical points in a relationship where it could be make or break. And so you've got to recognize this is going to cost the
Yeah.
relationship. Are we willing to pay the price for whatever this thing is we might be thinking about, this decision we might be thinking we want to make, all right? Whether that's
Mhm.
individually or collectively. And so that idea of building an account, that you're always making deposits and that the withdrawals are always substantial. I'll give you an example. You know, we made all these deposits in our relationship, in our marriage. And in 99, I had a major depressive episode. I couldn't get
Mhm.
out of bed. I could not be a wife. I could not be a mother. I certainly couldn't be a pastor.
Mhm.
And it was in those days that it literally, I was taking big chunks of deposits out of our account because Rudy was having to care for me. He was having to care for our kids. He was having to manage a church. And all of that cost our relationship and cost him. He was willing to pay that price.
Mhm.
But not
Wow.
everyone is. You know,
Yeah.
I'm a cancer survivor. And Oswald, it was amazing to me to hear how many women end up getting a divorce because their partner can't handle their illness. That blew me away.
Yeah.
I want to share something with you. When we got married, my uncle performed our wedding ceremony. The husband to the woman who was my aunt that introduced us ultimately.
Okay.
And in the course of saying the marriage vows, he looked at Rudy and said, "She's well now," right? I look back and I know that that was a prophetic word, that there was going to be a time about, what was it, 99? We got married in
Mhm.
85. So
Mhm.
whenever that, whatever that time frame is,
Mhm.
I wasn't going to be able to be all that I would have wanted to be for my husband and my family.
Mhm.
And what he was saying in that she's well now, Rudy, how did you interpret that?
You know, you pointed it out to me. I thought it was odd that he would say that.
Mm,
It was in the part of the vows, in sickness and in health,
right.
Mhm.
forsaking all others, keep only to her, so long as you both shall live. And and in sickness and in health, that's when he paused.
Mm-hmm.
He said, in sickness and in health. And then he paused and he said, she's well now. All right. And and then he kind of said, but that could change.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And it was kind of shocking,
Mm,
uh, subtly shocking to a person. Like, I had never been married before.
Mhm.
I wasn't like a Christian or a church person in those days. It was I just thought it was an odd place to pause. But I did take note. I didn't think about really in that moment that one day something could happen. You don't really think about that.
right.
Um, you know, um, in that I idealized moment of the nuptial. Just in that very beginning phase of that life together. The last thing you're thinking about is some tragedy is going to happen. All
Mm,
right, some
Yeah.
some some challenge is going to occur, and but what it I think it's subconsciously, when it did happen, uh, we did reflect on, but she's not well now. All
mm,
right,
Yeah.
and what does
Yeah.
that mean? Does that mean I take flight? Does that mean I just stand? It wasn't a never a decision to do anything other than stand, though. It's kind of how I'm wired.
for which I'm grateful for your wiring.
Yeah. I think the easy ones were starting a ministry and practically losing everything materially.
Hmm.
That was the easy one. Neither one of us have ever really been material people. It's nice to have it, but it's not the goal.
Hmm.
So starting a ministry, practically losing everything, um, you know, struggling financially to get by for many years in that ministry. Um, that wasn't the moment. Um, Juanita's illness, um, Juanita's illness, the first one, the nervous breakdown, that was super challenging. But we had two little girls who um, who needed us, and in that moment needed me. Um, and so that wasn't a challenge. I think the cancer diagnosis um, was a challenge because of everything that we had gone through up until that point. And that was 2009.
Nah.
Um, Everything that we'd gone through up until 2009, um, I could see myself walking through it. In 2009, when the diagnosis occurred, I had to face for the first time there's a possibility she won't be with me for the rest of this ride. And at that point, um, that was a very destabilizing moment for me. Juanita has a resolute faith, unlike many people I've met in my life. In those moments, I watched her dig in to her faith and hold on. In those moments, I had to, in many cases, rely on her faith.
I
What
came
type
from
of
a
time about?
very quiet family that
Hmm.
doesn't, that up until now, didn't talk about the difficulties, right?
Hmm.
Um, and it was kind of if you imagine, I often called myself a good little girl. That's what I call myself in Learning to Be, my book, right? And so good little girls never complain, they don't fuss, they don't fight, they they just take it in, they swallow hard, right? And so what my therapist and I have worked on is me learning how to say in healthy ways what I need to say and not having to swallow hard, because we now know that the body can store. And so when we're stuffing all these emotions, they're going to come out somewhere. And so for me, communication has been one of the growth areas for me, learning how to communicate.
Yeah, I think what we try to also do is to not carry what amounted to a disagreement or let's say a misunderstanding into another day. We try to table whatever that challenge was in that day and not have it on another day into another day. And I think that was key. And I think when Juanita hit on it, um, she has never used my vulnerabilities as weapons. She's never weaponized my vulnerability.
And he's
Uh,
never done it for me either. That's the mutual thing, you know?
yeah. So, and that at the core of that is how trust is built, and I think it's one uh, one moment, one occurrence after another, where you are literally proving to the person you're with that you would not um, use what you know
Mhm,
to win a fight.
mhm. So I'm going through a unique time right now in that my mom um, has been given a stage 4 lung cancer diagnosis. And so I'm in this season where while I'm not the primary caregiver for my mom, my dad is. Um, but I'm engaged in the course of the week, giving him relief, right? And so one of the things that Rudy knows that I like is notes. And so today in my bag are 2 notes from him. He has been giving me notes throughout this whole thing. I love flowers, and so he brings fresh flowers. There are things he knows I don't like to do, and like grocery shopping. And so he calls and says, "Hey, I'm going to stop by the store. Is there something you would like?" The knowing, for me, it always boils down into knowing your partner's love language. And there's a book called The 5 Love Languages. And so we went through that book early on in our marriage. And one of the things that we had in common was quality time. And so, as an example, the past few snow days we had gave us quality time. And I am so grateful that Rudy recognizes the things that feed me in our relationship and he
Mm-hmm.
gives them liberally. And they're not, there are times when he wants to go and buy me a piece of jewelry and I'm like, I don't need another piece of jewelry, but can we snuggle some more? Can we take another day? We had planned on getting back from this trip on Friday. Can we spend the night to Saturday and come back on Sunday? For me,
Mm-hmm.
he knows what speaks to my soul and he offers it generously. I only hope that I give him back what he needs. And right now has been a time when I've just realized how much he has been helping to fill my tank while I walk with my mom and my dad and my
Mm.
sister for that matter, because she's involved in the journey too. So knowing, I'll put it this way: the things you did to get a partner, you keep doing to keep them.
For me, no one shared relationship advice.
Okay.
So that was strictly on the job training.
Mhm.
Um,
Wow.
so what I realized we do, what I realized we do is we um we we decide um what we want.
Mhm.
and then we start moving towards that decision. One act, one day, one encounters at a time. I will say this: early in our marriage, we were at a revival at Windsor Village, and Reverend Juanita Lean was preaching. And before she had just gotten married, I believe, to Martin. And she was preaching, and it was early in my formation period. I was there in church, still making a decision uh, around Christianity, uh, but this particular lady that night was new in her marriage and preaching out of that context. And she said something that night. She said, Martin and I have made the decision to outdo one another in love.
Mhm.
And it was like it hit me, the words hit me and Juanita at the same time.
Mhm.
And we looked at each other and and it was an agreement. Like, yeah, that's it. We can outdo one another in love. And for the next 38 years, that's exactly what we tried.